all the time. I tell you, God ain't good. I be lying. Low key lit, high key lit, low key lit, flex. Whole squad be lit, low key lit, high key lit, low key lit, flex. Whole squad be lit.
I'm really grateful that you have tuned in today for this episode. I'm really excited about it. The whole month of August, we're going to be focusing on mental and emotional health in various perspectives. And so today, I'm super excited. We're talking about something that I think is a little taboo that people don't really talk about, but we really need to have a conversation about it because a lot of people suffer from it. And that is religious trauma. How do we heal from that? Whether you are a Christian, Buddhist, or whether you're practice Catholicism, whatever it is, I think in every religion there's some type of experience that people can have that can produce trauma. So I'm really excited. My special guest is the wonderful and lovely.
You're so sweet. That's so sweet.
And so she is a licensed therapist. And so she's going to be talking about this and kind of specializes in religious trauma. And so I really think that this is going to be a conversation that hopefully gets people thinking. Because sometimes you may know somebody, because you may not know what was wrong. You'd be like, you know what? Now I think I do. Or maybe it's you.
Right.
Right. So first of all, Pamela, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. So let's first of all give us some background about who you are, what you do, and kind of what defines you being able to talk about this topic today.
Sure. I have my license in clinical social work, like you mentioned earlier. I'm a licensed clinical therapist, and I've been practicing therapy since 2004. I'll use the dates after graduate school. I've been practicing since then, mostly working with adolescents and families. I was doing community-based mental health for about 13 years. And then I decided that I wanted to focus on private practice. And so I kind of just trickled out of community-based mental health, which was where I was going to from house to house and schools and courts and doing therapy there, to working out of an office. So that's where I am now. And the way I got to the religious trauma therapy is because I would be working with clients, especially adult clients, and they would have symptoms of anxiety. They would exhibit symptoms of depression. And whenever we would get to the root of it, a lot of times it would be based on their religious practices, or even if they weren't practicing currently, it was old religious practices or old religious doctrine that they grew up in. And so once I started, really getting into that and asking questions about that, and then honestly identifying my own religious trauma really helped me as well. And so I just kind of went full force into a rebranding, because at the time, and I still see the general population. So that's like any type of issue somebody wants to come with or bring to me, I work through that with them. But I decided to put my focus on religious trauma therapy. For one, because like you mentioned in your intro, it is taboo, especially in the African American community. Talking about religion and dissecting it and pointing out some negatives about it is really taboo, because we hold very tightly to our religious beliefs, depending on, what religion you come from, or if you were born into it, or if you got into it older. Those types of things make a difference. But talking about trauma in the context of our religious spaces is extremely taboo. And I've heard a lot of people talk about, this is just church hurt and people are just being sensitive. And it's like, no, there is actual data that's been gathered on people who leave their religious institutions and go and try to live out in the world without that structure, and how that can be overwhelming and scary for them. So I decided, with all of that, that I would put my focus on that, because a lot of the therapists that I've seen involved, and not even here in Georgia, but who have focuses on it, are white therapists, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I also believe there needs to be some diversity so that our community can see therapists that look like you and I, that also want to help them tackle this issue. Because to be honest, a Black church experience and a Caucasian church experience, or Hispanic church experience, or Asian church experience, there are different things that happen in those contexts. So I just want to be available, and I want to provide some diversity in the field. So that's pretty much how I got into that specifically.
No, that's awesome. And I think, especially talking about it in the African American perspective, because in a lot of African American perspectives, religion is the nucleus.
Core.
And
Mm-hmm.
so people don't, they feel like it's attacking, like you don't talk bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It feel like it's an attack.
Exactly. And so I think that's why having this conversation, I think it's important. But for people who maybe have never heard the terminology religious trauma, like how would you really define it? Like how would you define religious trauma?
Religious trauma is a group of symptoms like anxiety and depression, low self-esteem, low self-worth, that are symptoms of people who are trying to leave their religious fold. So I may have a general client who's coming in with anxiety symptoms, or symptoms of depression, and it is based off of some life experiences, like it may be work, it may be a broken relationship with a friend or a family member, or a spouse or a boyfriend. But someone with religious trauma doesn't have anxiety about those specific things. Their anxiety is caused by leaving their religious context and then having to go out into the world and live without that structure. And it's mostly from a religious context that has been extremely strict, that has been extremely dogmatic, where they have to conform, and where everything, all of their decisions, everything that they do, everything that their religion hinges on, is based on heaven and hell. So this person has lived a life of constantly trying to have moral perfection and religious perfection, and it has damaged them. And so now there's anxiety around how to live after leaving that, because their social support is cut off. All of their community, if they're really involved in the church, that gets cut off. And like we just talked about, people may ostracize them because they feel like them leaving the religion is an attack on it. And so there's anxiety and several other symptoms that surround religious trauma therapy when somebody is trying to leave and just kind of restructure their life from an emotionally healthy perspective.
No, I think that's good. Like I've known people, like she converted to Christianity, but initially a woman that I knew, she was a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I tell you she left, family cut her off,
Mm-hmm.
she could not have any more communication with, and I just really thought about what kind of trauma does that produce? Like, because I'm no
Absolutely.
longer a part of the faith.
Right.
Like, but I'm still your family. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so I really just began to think, what kind of trauma is that producing for her? And even though she was like, I'm good, I'm saved, I got Jesus now, I understand truth, still I was like, there still is a void there that you're dealing with because you decided I'm not doing that anymore. And your whole family was like, okay, well, great, we don't want nothing else to do with you. And so I feel like there are a lot of situations where I don't think people really realize that religious practices or based on whatever sect it may be, because even in Christianity, there's different things like,
Right.
so that can affect you. And you may not even realize it. So I know you hit on a couple of signs for
Hmm.
people. So maybe it's anxiety,
Hmm.
depression. For a person who, let's say they may be like, what, I feel like something is there, but I'm not sure if this whole like religious trauma thing really applies to me. Are there any more signs that a person can kind of look for, either whether it's themselves or with someone else, that may reflect religious trauma?
Sure. There are definitely different levels. When you think about someone who is coming out of a cult, for instance, if they have come from a religion that's been really oppressive and they've been really sheltered and they haven't had much contact with the outside world, this is the extreme. So I'm talking about belonging to a religious community where you are told not to trust yourself, not to trust your own instincts, and to definitely stay away from anybody that's not connected to your religion. So I'll use my upbringing as an example. When I was growing up in church, we were told that we could associate with people outside of our religion, but we couldn't go to their church. We could not visit any of their church functions or practices. We were discouraged from visiting anybody else's church at all. Um, every decision and every rule we had to follow was like, if you don't do this, you are going to hell. If you think this, you're going to hell. If you question this, you are going to hell. So it is a really anxiety provoking thing to have to live with. So some of the signs in extreme cases like that would be for someone who leaves, they have a hard time trying to figure out how to make simple decisions. Because if you're coming from a religion that's been really strict, simple things like, should I go here out to eat? Should I go with these people? That those kinds of decisions cause anxiety. Should I listen to this music? Should I watch this movie? Those types of simple decisions cause anxiety. For somebody who may not have had that level of religious trauma, it could be simple things like when you're approached by somebody at your church to do a particular activity and you feel like you can't say no, that you don't want to do it. And so at that moment, you experience anxiety or you experience fear or you experience rapid heartbeat because you feel like, if I say no, what does that mean about my service to God? What does this mean about me being a good Christian? And you start to question all of those things based off of simply feeling like you can't say no. So you have, some people have panic attacks around those types of things. I've talked to people who aren't under, necessarily suppressive religion, but the way leadership approaches participation is really damaging. And they tie the participation or non-participation to whether or not you're being a good Christian and whether or not you're doing enough service for the Lord. That's really damaging, putting people in that position.
Absolutely. And I think for me, like, for people who are listening, like, I've been in church my entire life. So I have seen good, bad, ugly, in between, all of that. And I think as I've gotten older and come into my own, something that I keep at the forefront of my mind is a faith that can't be questioned. To me, is a cult. Like, if I can't ask questions or if I can't question
Right.
something, and I'm a person where I'm always ask why. If it don't
Right.
make sense to me, I'm like, why we do that? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And if I feel like I'm in an environment where I'm fearful to question, like, why we do this, or that doesn't make sense to me, or I can't express that, that's
Mm-hmm.
problematic for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I think at times in people's faith, I feel like sometimes, how can I put it? And I don't want to say common sense, but I feel like sometimes we leave what we normally would do at the door when it comes to faith, as opposed to like if somebody's trying to tell us you have to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And it's like, well, I don't want to do that. But
Right.
we feel like we can't challenge it because it's faith related.
It's faith related. Absolutely.
Where if there had been any other environment, I'm be like, wait, why are we doing that? You know, but I feel like for some reason, this almost like this barrier comes up when it comes to faith. I just have to do what I'm told. Like,
and that's because we've been given a list of do's and don'ts when it comes to faith. If you think about it, especially if you grow up in church, one of the things that we hear throughout our little church lives is you don't question God. And that means a lot. Not just questioning God, but that also means you don't question leadership. You don't question what we ask you to do while you're here. You don't question the reasons. You don't question the rules that we've set. You don't question anything. When I was growing up in church, and I'm sure for a lot of people, when it was said that you don't question God, that meant everything that had to do with the religious organization. You don't question any of that. So, you know, being in a space where you are not allowed to ask questions, you aren't allowed to have your individuality highlighted. It's not empowering. Nobody is helping you to develop critical thinking skills because all of the rules and everything is already laid out. So when you're talking about your moral compass of do's and don'ts, your religious space already comes with that list, depending on what denomination you're a part of. So some denominations, you know, wearing jewelry and wearing makeup and wearing pants and that type of thing is already laid out. So you don't have to make that decision because that decision is made for you, which is why when people leave, they struggle because when you're a part of it, the guidelines for how you live your life are already set. So if you're wondering, oh man, should I or should I not have a drink? You don't have to question that if your religion says alcohol is bad. It's not until after you leave and get out on your own and try to restructure your life and have a healthy, a more emotionally healthy spiritual life, if you choose to do that, that all of that stuff starts to come into question. And people usually start by questioning some of the doctrine and beliefs about God. Excuse me, but that's the beginning of it. The leaving and having to make those decisions about your life is the hardest part because you've been sheltered by a religion that provides all of that for you. They provide all of your social connections. They provide your ties to the community. They provide you benevolence when you need it. It's like a family. So leaving that and then having to make those decisions on your own, and in the back of your mind, if what you still have is that voice that says, God is going to be angry with you, God is going to punish you, you're going to go to hell. And you know, people also struggle with, okay, so what if they were right? What if that was what I was supposed to do? You know, those are the types of questions that people who suffer from religious trauma have, because it's like, this is damaging to me. I am having suicidal thoughts. I don't want to get out of the bed. I'm having panic attacks. Everything associated with going to church and participating it with my spiritual family makes me anxious. But what if they were right? And what if it's me and, you know, my connection to God just isn't strong enough? What if my faith isn't strong enough and I just left out of rebellion? Those are the types of things that people struggle with that have religious trauma.
No, I think that's really good. And I really think about a lot of structures for churches. I was talking to a friend the other day. I was like, I think one of the biggest failures of the church is three things. I said, I don't think that the church does a good job of teaching personal accountability, responsibility, and individuality, allowing people to be who
Right.
they are,
Right.
and not have to fit into this box. Like,
Right.
I don't have to sing this way. I don't have to be, I can just be who I need to be,
Right.
but still be a part of my faith. And sometimes I think how church may be structured, not all churches, but how
Right.
to be structured, it doesn't really lend itself to create an environment for people to, like I say, ask questions, or like you were saying, you can't question God. I think it's totally healthy to say that
Absolutely.
doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay to have questions. And I think a lot of times church leaders will say don't question God, or don't question, anything pertaining to God, because I think when you have questions, they actually don't have answers. So it's just
Listen, absolutely.
so it's just easier for me to tell you, don't question God, don't do that.
Right.
I don't really know the answer, but it's opposed to me saying I don't know.
Exactly.
I would rather tell you don't question God and put this unrealistic burden on you. I think if you are giving your life to a higher power, to God, with whoever you serve, it's like, I should be able to ask some questions.
Absolutely. You absolutely should. And I encourage, my husband, Christian, and I, we encourage people to ask questions. I always say that religious trauma usually starts because somebody is involved in a religious organization who's fear-based. So everything is based on fear. If you don't follow the rules, fear. If you don't tithe, if you aren't able to tithe regularly, fear. It's attached to fear, because we have instilled in people that this is what happens to you in your afterlife if you don't follow A, B, and C. And you know me, I'm always an advocate for people being able to be their whole selves. And a lot of religious spaces do not leave room for humanity. There are so many rules, and there is so much fear, and there is so much oppression and misogyny that the humanity gets squeezed out of people. And so there's no room to ask questions. There's no room to be different. There's no room to say no. There's no room to miss church or rehearsal, or say you don't want to sing, or say you don't want to volunteer. There's no room for that, because in some people's space, the humanity is squeezed out of them. So everything is spiritual. Everything is, I like to use the word mystical. It's almost like it's intangible. So you're in this constant pursuit of perfection. And you have all of these questions, and you have all of these gut feelings that something isn't right, or, it's causing you an insurmountable amount of stress, but you're not in a context where you're able to talk to somebody about it. And you're able to ask them questions and find out, okay, is this really healthy for me? And if you do talk to somebody, especially in that space, then they just reinforce the importance of why you need to do it, instead of addressing the emotional side and the stress and the anxiety that it could possibly be causing.
That's so true. And I'm curious, do you feel like it is wise? So if a person feels like, okay, I have some stressors when it comes to my church, or, the place that, I consider my place of faith, and I know that I may need to heal from some things. Do you think that it's wise for a person to kind of stay in that religious environment that they're in if they're trying to heal for some things? Should they take a break, or can you still stay in it and still, heal? How would that work?
That's going to depend on the experience that the person is having and where that trauma is coming from. So I'll use a relationship as an example, because that's what it is. When we go to church, we have a relationship with our church. So if I was talking to a man or a woman that was in a relationship and they asked me, should I leave this person? So if they were coming to me and the issue was, okay, you know, she's not respectful of my time and everything is last minute. And so I always feel rushed and it stresses me out. I would say, well, you don't have to break up for that reason. You may be able to talk and make a compromise about how to plan ahead. That way she can still get to do what she wants to do and you don't feel as stressed out. So when it comes to church, if it's an administrator that you're having an issue with, or particular ministry that you're having an issue with, and you're in that ministry or you have direct contact with that person, I would say in that instance, someone may be able to pull back from that relationship with that person one-on-one and no longer interact with them or step away from the ministry and be perfectly fine staying in their religious environment. On the other hand, if you are in a space that is, the stress is coming from the head, from leadership, or from the doctrine itself that's being enforced, and you feel like you are forced to carry out things and do things that are stressful and that are harmful to you mentally and emotionally, absolutely not. You need to leave. Because it's very similar to being in an abusive relationship. And it's like, once you realize that your church environment is having an effect on you psychologically and emotionally, to stay in that place is subjecting yourself to harm. And you won't have the space to even unpack what the issue is if you're constantly in that space and those unhealthy practices are being reinforced on a regular basis. There's no way for you to do that. There's no way for you to get healing and still attend and have that unhealthy stuff reinforced from week to week. Did I answer that for you?
That totally makes sense, because
okay.
I think sometimes you need to take a second and away.
Yeah.
And there's some moments you just be like, okay, this ain't, I need to leave. Like, this isn't necessarily healthy for me. I think, I was listening to, I think, a podcast about church hurt and people who are dealing with that. And a lot of people who are like, I'm never going going back to church again. I'm never stepping foot through the doors again. And they had some kind of trauma or some kind of experience where it was just like, it just completely turned them off. And I realized people sometimes I think get mad at God, and I'm like, I don't think God has ever been the issue. I think God's representatives sometimes are. And most times people develop trauma because of some interaction that they've had with another person.
Right.
For people who feel like, okay, I identified that, yes, I've been hurt, this happened, whatever the case may be, that I experienced some type of trauma, and I want to, heal from this in a whole way. Like, what are the first steps? Who do I talk to? Where do I go? How do I properly try to heal from the religious trauma I've experienced in my past, or I may be currently experiencing?
Well, one of the first things to do, it would be what we just talked about, which would be disconnecting. Whether it be a particular ministry or, no longer interacting with someone who's causing the stress, or you feel like is the source of it, or people that are the source of it, you first have to disconnect so that you can think clearly and process clearly. The second thing that is going to be really helpful is finding a therapist, because the trauma associated with it, depending on the environment that you come out of, is going to need professional attention. And the reason why you will find people who are angry with God is because the religion is given to them and the doctrine is given to them as God. So when you're dealing with people's doctrine, which is, the scriptures that people choose to highlight, that they build their religion around, their religious practice around. So if you're dealing with a religious practice whose doctrine is solely based on heaven and hell, and all of our decisions are about us escaping eternal damnation, that is given to you as God. This doctrine is God, not this is the set of rules that we've created for our organization. It's given to you as God. So when it becomes oppressive and hurtful and harmful, the person who is on the receiving end of that hurt sees that as God. That's why it's really hard for a lot of people who come out of environments like that to compartmentalize and understand that the hurt was from people and something people have created. Because when you're in it, there is no separation. There's no separation of people and God. It's all God. God created, God inspired, God given. That's how we talk in church. God gave me this to give to you. And so it's hard for people to make that separation of, no, these people did something really damaging. This religious group practices something that's really damaging. God is still over here, and God still loves you and wants to be in your life, or whatever your higher power or creator that you ascribe to still is there for you and still loves you. The person coming out of it sees it all as God. So it's really hard for people to make that separation, that God isn't the source of this hurt. But definitely have to disconnect from that and try to find a therapist to talk to help you unpack the trauma and unpack the experiences and put them in perspective, and then help you move forward, which is like, some of the things would be helping you identify specific feelings associated with certain practices, dissecting that, helping clients. This is something that I do a lot, is helping clients get in touch with their inner child. I always say that the adult is the thinker and the child is the feeler. And so the adult needs the child in order to stay in contact with their true feelings, and the child needs the adult to help them process. And so that's some of the work that would be done, if you're going to see a therapist and you have a good therapist that you trust. They can help you unpack that stuff. They can help you get in touch with those feelings and process what those feelings mean, and also help the person with reconnecting and feeling self-assured and gaining some self-worth and feeling like they can trust themselves and the decisions that they make as an individual. Just really helping them get in touch with themselves. Some people want to keep a connection spiritually. They want to keep a connection to a higher power, and they just need to figure out where and how they can do that in a healthy way. Some people who have extreme cases of religious trauma don't want to be affiliated with anything. And sometimes they come back around to it after a few years or a few months. And then some people just don't. They find other ways to connect that are outside of church. And I believe that that's perfectly fine. People just need a supportive community with whatever they decide to do so that they can be, emotionally well and whole. They just have to, work with someone that can help them figure out what's the healthiest route for them to take.
I think, first of all, that was awesome, because I kind of want to circle back to something you said earlier.
Okay, go ahead.
About African Americans, because I really want to deal with this, because I have become a very big champion for therapy. I initially struggled at first because I was like, I ain't about to tell nobody my business, because a lot of times in African American households, it's like you leave house business in the house. So for you, it's like what I'm gonna be telling this person? I'm not. No. But I think sometimes we don't realize how things have affected us.
Absolutely.
Realize how, because we have not dealt with certain things, they've steered certain decisions that we've made, and it
Mm-hmm.
takes a person outside of you to be like, "Hey, you notice that you do this, or
Right.
that's a pattern for you."
Right. Right.
And I would say, I think we're getting better, but it's still taboo.
Yeah.
Therapy is still taboo in African American spaces, and honestly, I would dare say in Black Christian spaces. And the reason why
Mm-hmm.
I say that is because a lot of times, and again, not all, but a lot of times people are like, "Oh, you just need to pray harder, or you just need to,
Right. Right.
you just gotta trust God more." And
Right.
like, but hey, I'm struggling. Like, and so I think there still is this stigma with therapists. So
Yeah.
how,
Definitely.
what are, I guess, and you may not be able to answer this, but for those who are not bound by the stigma, how can we properly promote, um, I guess, positivity towards mental health awareness and dealing with therapists, and that it's okay, especially in African American spaces. And how do we create that? Like, that's something I've been really thinking about a lot. Is I look at people who are around me, and I was like, you know what? I really think you need to go talk to this. So I think one of my
Most of us could
Instagram,
definitely use it.
right, and I think one of my Instagram followers posted this the other day, and I thought, brilliant. It was like, stop using "you need to go talk to somebody" as an insult, because
Right.
I think that has also built
Right.
up the stigma of it.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
like, so how can we really push the positivity of, I think, that therapy is okay. We need it. What can we do? I don't know, because I've been really thinking about it.
Well, one thing that I can definitely talk about that you mentioned is the fact that we in our African American community can be very secretive, and rightfully so, because when you think generations back to slavery, in the Jim Crow era, in the civil rights era, there were a lot of things that we absolutely had to keep in our family in order to stay alive. There were a lot of things that we could not go out in public and tell, or go out in public and say, that happened in our family, because there were people outside of our family and outside of our race that would come into our families and totally take our families apart, whether they're going to come and pull children out of the home or whatever the case may be. So that was a very rational fear for us to have at one point in time, because all social services were not good at that time. They were looking for ways to tear apart Black families. So we had to keep hush hush about stuff that was happening. The dangerous part is that when we're raised in that, there's no differentiation between what needs to be told and what needs to be kept a secret. Most of the time, it's everything needs to be a secret. So even when stuff starts to be damaging, we don't even tell that stuff. And so what we can actually do to promote mental health in our community is talk about it and normalize it. We need to normalize healthy emotions. We need to normalize emotional wellness, and we need to stop normalizing unhealthiness and dysfunction, like, and trauma, because we normalize that stuff. So, and a lot of times we don't even know we do it. We just say, girl, my nerves bad. No, that's actually anxiety. That's actually stress. That's not just your nerves being bad. When we have heart palpitations, or, something makes us really anxious, and we get sweaty and we get shaky, that's not normal. But we will water it down and say stuff like, I just need a drink. I just need, my nerves just bad. I just need to take a few deep breaths. When in all actuality, we probably need to go down and sit and talk with somebody, because once we start talking, there are a lot of things that we need to unpack. That's the first thing. Another thing that we can do is exactly what you said, which is stop using talking about therapy and counseling as an insult, because what that does is it reinforces that you need to keep all of that to yourself. All of that hurt, all of that pain, that sadness, that anger, that resentment, whatever that stuff is, all of that childhood trauma, all of the stuff that, is affecting you in your adult life, what that says is you just need to keep all of that to yourself. You need to keep that, because we don't want to deal with that. And in religious spaces, when we say stuff like, you just need to pray harder, you just need to have more faith in God, it's so dismissive, because we pray and God gives you the answer in the form of mental health resources. That is the answer to the prayer. So if you are stressed and you feel depressed, or you feel suicidal, or you are participating in some self-harming activities, to tell somebody that they just need to pray is extremely damaging. They need to see somebody. That's the answer to the prayer, is the mental health resources, or the counseling resources, or the self-help group. Those are the resources. And so I don't knock prayer at all. I absolutely believe that prayer is necessary for people. For me, it falls in the same category with meditation. Everybody needs to take some quiet time. Everybody needs time to focus on their thoughts. If you believe in God, everybody needs to take time to have dialogue with God. Everybody does. That's what helps to keep us centered. But when we get done having that conversation with God, or we get done meditating, and we get done in our quiet time, putting what we need out into the atmosphere, then it's time for us to do some work and find some resources that we can connect with, that will help us be healthier emotionally and psychologically. We do it for everything else. It's we don't go to our pastor and say, I broke my foot, but I'm just going to pray that God heals the bones. That's not what we say. The pastor would look at you like you were out of your mind and say, did you go to the emergency room? Did you go to have that treated? You sprained your ankle. You were in a car wreck. You got some internal damage you don't know about. Did you go to the doctor and see about that? Did you have a specialist look at that? That's what we tell people when it comes to physical wellness and physical wholeness. But when it comes to the mental health, we tell people in church a lot of times, oh, your faith just isn't strong enough. That's why you're so stressed out, or you're not praying right, or you're not praying often enough, or you missed a good church service last week. Had you been here, pastor talked about such and such. And all of that is, all of the services that's all fine and good, but you still need to go somewhere where somebody specializes in emotional and mental wellness. You need that, just like you need the physician for your physical wellness. You need the mechanic so that your car can run right. We go to the gym so that we can be in shape and that we can be healthy. But when it comes to our mental state, it's like we pull back all responsibility when it comes to that. I'm not going to be active in any of that. I'm just going to let God handle that. And it can be really damaging and really counterproductive to people's healing to not take that next step and find somebody that can help them process.
That's so true. And I will say this from personal experience. Like, I had to go through 2 therapists because I was like, that ain't it.
Yeah.
And I'll be even more transparent. I purposely sought out a Black woman because I needed somebody who could identify.
Right.
Because there are experiences that I have as a 34-year-old African American woman that
Right.
a 64-year-old white woman is not going to really understand. So
Right.
for me, it was for me to feel comfortable, I need somebody who can identify with me and like who
Right.
can share in the experiences. Like
Right.
even
Right.
sometimes like in our dialogue, in our sessions. Like it's just
Yeah.
and it allowed me to kind of exhale and be like, okay, I feel comfortable and I can
Mhm.
share what's going on. So
Mhm.
if you don't get it right on the first try to therapist, keep
Yeah.
trying.
You
Like
keep trying.
don't give up. I feel like it's a relationship
It's
because
absolutely a
it's
relationship.
a relationship
It's
and
absolutely a
yeah.
relationship.
And so I
But
think yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say it's a relationship because you're sitting with somebody, however often you decide you want to see them, and you're sharing everything with them, all of the nuances of your life, all of your personal issues, your familiar background, your history, where you come from, how you grew up. You're sharing all of that with them. And so you absolutely need to find somebody that you trust, somebody that you feel like understands you, somebody who is going to work with you and not on you. I always say that. As a therapist, I tell my clients all the time, this is a partnership. I'm working with you. You don't come here for me to work on you. That's not how it works. We have to work together. And so when you find a therapist, you have to find somebody who is willing to let you be a part of the process as well, because they're your life experiences. And so if you get a therapist and you feel funny, or the vibe is off, or the energy is off, and you don't feel like you're being heard, or you don't feel like the therapist is targeting what you've brought to them, and they seem to have their own agenda, then you absolutely need to find another therapist. You need to find another one.
I agree. And how I knew I found the right therapist was when I'm not with her, I'm still doing the work.
Yeah.
Like that was like everybody else, I felt like they were coddling me in a sense. So it's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, I'm not, but when I left her, it gave me things to think about, or I'm dig deeper. I'm sitting with myself and like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
like it
Mm-hmm.
happened this weekend. I had like a huge revelation and it was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding
Uh-huh.
me? Because I'm still being encouraged to do the work. So like you said,
Right.
it's a partnership. It's like we're in this thing together. And so
Right.
this person can see the growth in you. They can see,
Right.
you know, like, hey, you noticed last month, that's a big
Uh-huh.
milestone because you were doing that.
Positive feedback and reinforcement. Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly. So for people who are like, okay, that sounds great. How do I start to even look for a therapist? Like, what are some resources that people can um, that maybe are available to people that may feel like they're suffering from religious trauma, or, are there any sites that people can go to try to
Sure.
find?
Sure. One book that I read in particular, that has really been helpful for me personally, and in the area of religious trauma therapy with my clients, is a book called Leaving the Fold. And it's by Marlene Winnell. And she is a therapist who had her own religious trauma experience. And she has written about it from her personal experience and several other people's experience. And so this book breaks down the makeup of fundamentalist Christianity and how it can be oppressive. She breaks it down in great detail in different sections. And then there is a section of the book that talks about what happens after people leave. And then the last section talks about the healing process, which is reclaiming your feelings and how to operate in the world, how to be more self-assured. So that is an incredible, incredible book. It has several assessments throughout the chapters that are really helpful as far as testing your level of trauma in certain areas. It's full of self-assessments. Marlene Winnell also has a website called journeyfree.org, and it's dedicated to helping people transition out of harmful religions and cults and recover from that trauma. They have retreats. They have support groups. They have workshops and conferences. And so that's a great website for information. The website also has additional resources and links where you can find videos on YouTube about religious trauma. There are a plethora of great videos on YouTube about religious trauma. Another website is recoveringfromreligion.org. That's another website that has support and resources, and they have a community for helping people who have left religious environments that have been traumatizing for them. Also, if you're looking for a therapist, of course, like I'm sure finding your therapist, I'm not sure if you found her on therapyforblackgirls.com, but that's a great resource for Black women to find other Black female therapists. And psychologytoday.com is another great resource for finding a therapist. You know, you can look in your area by your zip code or your city. It's kind of like Facebook for therapists. So it has their entire profile and what they specialize in and different things like that. That's a great resource for finding a therapist to help you along on that journey to trying to, you know, resolve some of the trauma and move forward and have some healthy boundaries when it comes to spirituality and religion. Right now, my husband and I are going through a book with our church, the faith community, and it's called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and it's by Peter Scazerro. And it's a really, really, really helpful book that helps people recognize the signs of being in religious spaces that aren't healthy for them, having beliefs and practices that aren't healthy for them. And what I like the most about the book is that it starts out talking about the things that are unhealthy in our religious spaces. So, you know, that's another one of my recommendations because it's been really helpful in our faith community with helping people uncover some of the things that they may have been practicing or believing that has really been causing them harm, whether subconsciously or consciously. So those are my resources.
No, I think those are really great. And if Therapy for Black Girls, they also have she also has an awesome podcast.
She absolutely does. Yes, she does.
Yeah, so if you are interested in that, definitely check that out. So if people would like to get in touch with you, you know, what are some ways that they can do that? How can they follow you? What are the best ways to get in touch with you?
Well, since making religious trauma my target, I have I'm going through some construction as far as website and Facebook pages so that it can show what I really wanted to. Right now, the best way to get in contact with me is via email, and that is pmerritt, SOG, @yahoo.com. Also, they can reach me via phone if you want to give that out as well. 404-609-1004. And they can also follow me on Instagram, and that handle is Pam Sessions, and that's PAM _ Sessions, SESSIONS, and that's on Instagram.
Awesome. And I'll also have that information in the body of the episode. So
okay,
anybody that wants to utilize it definitely can. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you, the invite, being able to discuss this, and you know, what's most important for me, like you, is creating positivity around therapy for our community, but also just affirming people who have religious trauma, because there are a lot of people that will try to make a joke out of it and say, oh, that's just church hurt and you just being sensitive. I want to reaffirm that religious trauma is real, And you don't have to let anybody talk you out of what you know is your life experience. Just because they can't identify with that, that doesn't mean that what people are experiencing or have experienced in their religious context isn't real. It's a very real thing. Very real.
Absolutely. And um, I know I've had my moments where I needed to take a step back and I just needed to breathe for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And to let people know it's okay. And you still can have a healthy faith relationship.
Right.
No, you just need to put things into proper perspective and balance and making sure that your boundaries are erected. Like a whole lot of
Absolutely.
things. You still can have, I don't want people to be like, oh my God, I got to walk away from my faith. No, you don't. It can
Right.
totally be very healthy for you. It's just that you want to make sure that wherever you are, it's
Right.
not oppressive and binding you as opposed to giving you, allowing more freedom and like that you're okay. And like you said, that you being human is okay.
Right. Absolutely.
Absolutely, so, but again, thank you so much for taking the time to
You are
do
welcome.
this. I really appreciate it, and I hope that whoever is listening to this, that you enjoyed it as well. As I said, I'm going to put the information in the text of the episode, so everybody, you can have access, even the books and the links that you need.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
put that as well. If you guys would like to find out more about me or any upcoming episodes of Lit Sessions, go to my website, go to iamMarielleT.com. You spell that IamMariellet.com. And then thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I will see y'all on the next episode.
All the time, I tell you God ain't good. I be low key lit, high key lit, low key lit, flex. Whole squad be lit, low key lit, high key lit, low key lit, flex. Whole squad be lit.